Hello! You're watching the Great Canadian Bagel here, and today we have the final BC 2024 election forecast. Sorry for the delay on this, I just wanted to get all the polls in before I put my final forecast out, and of course, all the polls came out at like midnight BC time, or the final few polls I was waiting for, so it took longer than anticipated, so I couldn't make the video until today. So it's getting up now because that's what it is. But there's still, I don't know, time off for the results unknown, so here we go. Before I begin the video though, I'd once again like to shout out my channel members. Thank you for the support you guys give the channel. It makes everything I do a lot easier and really wouldn't be possible without you guys. If you want to support the channel, you should go down and link in the description below and press that join button. Every little bit helps. Otherwise, just do your regular YouTube things, like, share, subscribe, comment below. And with that, let us begin. I'll keep this pretty brief because I don't think, in general terms, anything really new happened in the last week of the campaign. But we are seeing a big swing. So obviously I have the New Democrats winning now. David Eby is now winning. The Greens have gained a seat, and Rustad is now trailing. We look down here, we can see he's lost 5 seats over the last week, give or take. And the NDP's gained 4 seats. If you look at popular vote figures, the NDP's basically the same, but the Conservatives have lost 0.3. Greens have gained 1.5. Notably, though, the Conservatives have lost a lot of vote share and margin too, because a lot of the small gain that the NDP had has been heavily concentrated in like Fraser Valley and the South. The South really didn't do anything for them. And the Conservatives have gained ground in the North while losing ground in, or the North and a little bit in Vancouver, but lost ground in Fraser Valley, the South, and Vancouver Island. And notably, losing the ground in Fraser Valley, going from a 10.7 margin to a 5.9 margin, and losing ground in Vancouver Island, going from negative 3.8 to negative 7.9. Yes, it's a negative margin because they're behind. That was pretty big. You look here at the seats, they lost 3 seats net on Vancouver Island, and they lost 3 seats in Fraser Valley while gaining 1 in the North, which then gives us this election. Now you might ask yourselves, okay, so why did this just happen? Why are all the polls suddenly favoring NDP when they weren't for a while? Sorry about that. So if you look at the early election, like up until about here, oh yeah, like Conservatives were leading in all the polls. And then we see a big correction around here. Then it kind of goes back and forth a little bit. And then near the end, it's roughly where it is right now, where it's about a toss-up in popular vote. Different methodologies and different results get different numbers. Online versus IVR, etc. Now, I won't go too far into the difference between online and IVR, but they are different sampling methods, and I do think IVR is probably more accurate for this particular election. But even if you are looking at IVR, Forum, which is an IVR pollster, is only forecasting 46 seats for the Conservatives. Main Street's, I think, 47, which is barely a win. Palace is forecasting the Conservatives lose. So it's not... Liaison, I think, would be like a tie in seats, which is an NDP win, effectively. So there is some data there. There's some numbers there. But it looks like, broadly speaking, even the IVR pollsters are suggesting the Conservatives are going to lose. And the online ones obviously suggest that with their numbers. So why was there this big change that suddenly hit here? And I will just put a big preface here. By the end of the vote counting tonight, my vote share margins could be very wrong. And it's because I have a baked-in assumption in my model right now that I think turnout's going to be relatively high this election. And the BC Conservatives are doing the best with young voters. or yeah, they're doing the best with young voters. They have 46.8% of young voters to 34.2% for the NDP, whereas the NDP is 48% to 55 plus, and it's only 39% for the BC Conservatives. So if turnout is higher than 2020, which is what I'm expecting, what I'm predicting, then this result makes sense. If turnout is lower than 2020, the NDP is going to win a popular vote lead and probably win more seats than what I have forecast here. And the reason why I don't normally disclaim something like this is because normally this isn't a big, there is usually age polarization, but the age polarization isn't usually this steep and in a way that runs contrary to a lot of historical data. Historically, youths have usually voted NDP or left wing, and older people have voted conservative. Now, for reasons I won't get into this video, I think young people are swinging very conservative, especially in places like BC, compared to older generations. So that's going to change things up. But as of right now, we don't have a lot of data what that actually looks like. Do they turn out to the polls? We know a lot of left-wing youth don't actually vote. Are the people who poll right-wing but are young, do they vote? We don't really know. So this could be a big miss on my part, and I'm fully disclaiming that right now. So if I do have a big miss tomorrow, people aren't like, haha, you suck. It's like, no, I fully am aware I could have a huge miss here because I have a bunch of assumptions that are really hard to make. And I want us to note, too, for people like 338 or any other modeler you might see or look at for this election, there's so many assumptions on how the BC Conservative vote's going to be distributed, where they're drawing their supporters from, what turnout's going to look like, that there could be a lot of misses, or we could be really accurate. If you look again at 338, 338 has almost the same numbers as me. He is 50, 41, 2. You look at his map. Would I prep this before video? Of course not. He has the BC NDP winning the popular vote, but that's whatever. Who cares? But you look at the seat map, and he has very similar. Like, Chilliwack goes NDP for him, but the Conservatives are winning Richmond Stevenson and stuff like that. He has West Vancouver more closer. He has North Island being one, but the Bulkley Valley Stuykind is going NDP. Like, there's differences, but it's not big differences. It's not overarching differences. It's not gargantuan differences. Now, that said, back to the main topic for this video. Why did this swing happen? Why did we go from most of the polls were saying the BC Conservatives are going to win to now most polls are saying they're going to lose? And I think the easy answer to that is it's the exact same effect that happened in the 2021 election for Aaron O'Toole. A lot of polls in the early 2021 election were saying Aaron O'Toole was going to win. But you'll notice when you look at 2021 in Canada that those polls only occur after the writ drops. I'll show you what I mean here. So we have in August, early August, we have the Liberals consistently winning all these polls. Not by a lot, but by enough. And then we get this brief period where we have the Conservatives winning a bunch of polls. Not just IVR, not just telephone, but also online polls. And it's really only Innovative that really shows a difference. And then you get some Research Co. ones that are like a toss-up. But then we get back to solid Conservative leads into September, into the debate. And then we start seeing other things. And I think what's happening here is it's key is that it goes into the debate. The debate is when a lot of undecided voters decide. It's when a lot of people who might not vote in the election come out and decide. It's when people really start paying attention. And if we look for BC here, oops, did not mean to do that. What do we see? Where Conservatives are winning. Oh, we have a little anomaly here. Debate, announced toss-up from there on. So I'm not saying the debate was decisive. Don't get me wrong. Most of the polling suggests actually that the debate was pretty inconclusive. But the difference is once the debate happened, or around the time the debate happens, a lot of people started paying attention. And the theory I have for this election is a lot of NDP voters were really used to the last 2 years where the BC NDP were just winning outright. Like if we go seat trends from October 9th, 2023 until October 7th, 2024, the BC NDP were projected to win a solid majority government. Then we have 2 updates of my model where the BC Conservatives are barely winning, and now the BC NDP is back to where it was at the start of the race. So what I think happened here is what I'm going to call a momentum effect. Now, momentum effects are not actual vote support. It's not, aha, we're going to vote NDP because of momentum. Or sorry, vote BC Conservative because of the momentum. It's that a lot of people on the BC Conservative side are really energized early in the campaign, so we're more likely to answer polls affirmatively. But a lot of BC NDP supporters are either not answering the polls or were undecided. And they weren't undecided because I might vote Conservative, I might vote Green. They were undecided because I might not vote. In general terms, I'm of the opinion that the undecided column in a poll is actually people who just might not vote at all. They're not necessarily, I'm going to vote Conservative, but I'm maybe changing my mind. It's, I might not vote, but if I vote, maybe Conservative. Or, I might not vote, but maybe NDP. And around the debate, these people started paying attention to the polls. They started paying attention to the election and the campaign, and they realized the NDP might lose. And then all these people were like, oh crap, we got to vote. And I think a lot of the BC NDP candidates and their ground game really honed in on this. You look at some of the estimates for the advanced polls, and the advanced polls suggest that the BC NDP is doing really well in the early vote. They get a lot of people voting early. And that stands true to this idea that there was a lot of low propensity voters for the BC NDP who might not have voted, but both because the BC NDP really did a good ground game to get them to turn out, and these voters realized that the election was actually close and their vote was important, that they decided to vote in the end. And that's why you see this swing. I don't think the dynamics of the campaign in their 3rd, 4th weeks actually changed who's voting for who manifestly. I don't think you're seeing a lot of people going, oh, I was for BC Conservative, but that guy said something stupid, I'm going to vote NDP now. Maybe, at the extreme end, you might see like, that guy said something stupid, I'm not going to vote now. But generally speaking, by the 3rd, 4th week of campaigns, there's not a lot of people who go from Conservative to NDP voter, or vice versa. And the other evidence I have for my suspicion is in the last little bit of the campaign, oops, sorry about that, the BC NDP recovered a lot of their, get this over here on my other screen, they recovered a lot of their previous voters. At the start of the campaign, they were looking at maybe low 70% vote retention from 2020, and near the end of the campaign now, we're in the mid 70s. Now, going from like 68 to 75 might not seem like a big deal, but that is a big deal. That is a lot of voters. That is a very large swing. Now you could possibly say, oh, those people were going to vote Green or were going to vote Conservative. But I think in reality, that was actually just undecided BC NDP voters from 2020 who realized, oh wait, I have to actually vote this time around, or else we're going to lose. And, well, as of the recording of this video on election day at 4:38 Atlantic time, they're going to win, the NDP. And now, the one last thing I want to leave on this is, regardless of if the fact that BC Conservatives lose or not today, what are the outcomes of this election? Well, the first outcome is we have a very different dynamic in BC. As of right now, the BC Conservatives are a qualitatively different party than the BC United. Will they stay that way for 4 years? We'll see. But I think there's a very good chance that the BC Conservatives will beat the BC NDP in 2028. By 2028, BC NDP will have been in power for 11 years. That's a very long time. Ebbie will be long in the tooth. Maybe the NDP could maybe switch Ebbie out for someone else. But the BC Conservatives will have a chance to do two important things. One, they can have a proper leadership race, properly build up their party infrastructure and fundraising, which they've had troubles with this entire campaign. They fundraised very poorly, probably because it's a brand new party and it's very hard to build these things from the ground up. But the other corollary to that is a new leadership race, because realistically speaking, there's likely going to be another Conservative leadership race if they lose here. A leadership race would bring in fresh blood, fresh ideas, and invigorate the party, give them a lot of media coverage, which would be good for the party. It would bring a lot of donations and a lot of fundraising. And the other big advantage the BC Conservatives will have going into 2028. Now, I don't think this is a very big factor, but it does affect some voters. I just don't think it's very important. Is they'll be able to vet their candidates better. Because there was a lot of issues with candidates being choice words. Now, the word choice or phrasing or comments of previous candidates, or sorry, in the past by candidates, I really think is a very small thing. Very few people, I think, actually really care about this. But the issue it does, is it can derail a campaign. Instead of the campaign being about what the BC Conservatives want to do or the NDP wants to do, a lot of the media coverage gets sucked up talking about this, which is great if the BC Conservatives are winning. But if the BC Conservatives aren't winning, it's very inconvenient. Because this is it's a dead media cycle. Talking about the comments of a candidate is a dead cycle. So back when the polls were suggesting the Conservatives were winning, I thought this was a good thing for them. But I think in hindsight and in practice, they weren't actually winning. It was just this momentum kind of effect that we saw with Aaron O'Toole in 2021. It was a false lead, not because the pollsters are bad, but because of just selective response biases, because of the momentum of the very moment. And as we saw, all the pollsters at the end started hurting towards the same result, which isn't, hurting is a bad way to say that, moved towards a very similar result. And I want to stress this, because some people have been commenting on this on Twitter and other places. Why does it always change the page position? Super annoying. You see these last rounds of polls here. This one's like +4. This one's Conservative +5. These are pretty much within margin of error of each other. Like, you look at this last Main Street poll versus this last Research Co poll. They both have, let's round this to a 3% margin of error on both. So this number for the Conservatives is within margin of error, and this is within margin of error. Same thing with Palace. Same thing with Forum. When you have a very close race, when you're looking at something that might be 1-2 percentage point win, you are going to see some very large supposed lead differences. Because the difference between the NDP doing 2 points better than average and the Conservatives doing 2 points worse, or let's say 4 points worse than average, is a 6-point swing. Of course. But it's actually not outside of margin of error movement in either column. So this looks like a big difference, but these two polls are within margin of error. I hope that makes sense. But with that, I will bid you guys all adieu, because there's not too much to say. I will do a post-mortem at some point. It might have to wait till November, because there is New Brunswick and Saskatchewan coming up, and I might have other stuff, and I have a US video I want to do. But In the post-mortem, I'll really break down more stuff when it's actually concrete and we can really speak in more detail about where the BC Conservatives are strong, where the NDP is strong, and what this might look like in future elections. But with that, I bid you adieu, and I'll see you next week with something else.